So welcome to session 5, which will be a roundtable discussion. So it's different to what we have so far. It's about access to therapy for patients with rare disease, from studies to approval, reimbursement, and optimal use. And we have a guest today, Professor René Westhovens, who is the president of the College for Orphan Drugs from the National Institute of Health and Disability Insurance from Belgium. And he will also lead the panel here. And he will start with a presentation together with Alexandre. And then also Davide and Maike will join the discussion. And there will be also an option that you can participate in the discussion. So there are cameras around, so you will also be live streamed. So in all Europe, people can follow this session. Okay?
Thank you. Thank you for this introduction. And to be clear, we have no fishbowl, so because there is no fishbowl and there's no fish swimming. And also the round table is not round. But at least it is the same purpose of all those things, is making a discussion possible and also taking input from experts and also input of everyone here present, as well experts, but also patient experts. It's very important, I think. First of all, I would like to introduce myself, the strange elephant in the room. Because, you know, CMT is, I know what CMT is. That means, I think I have a career behind me of 40 years of practice in rheumatology and clinical science and clinical trials in rheumatology. And I think I diagnosed 2 times CMT. And you know, we discussed that yesterday, that you miss diagnosis, and I think orthopedics miss more diagnosis than rheumatologists. but you know, even I think I diagnosed 2, and also, of course, refer them to an expert, because we don't treat that. But of course, it could be that I also missed patients, and that I don't know. And I'm pretty sure, yes. Okay, so as I said, I am a rheumatologist from training, and so internal medicine and then rheumatology, and I am also have a PhD in outcome measures in rheumatology, and also I'm interested in rehabilitation. It means that I do not only know something about the disease, but an immunology of the disease, but also in treating it, and let's say having the rehabilitation aspects, the functional aspects into account, taking that into account, and work together with patients already for 20 years. And this is important, I think. Based on that, I was asked to do this, but of course also because of my recent employment. So I'm an emeritus professor since 6 years. And since 14 years, I helped the Belgian government in organizing rare diseases and organizing orphan drug reimbursement. And I will explain a little bit further. So that's, during the last 14 years, what I mainly do. I'm president of the Flemish Network of Rare Diseases, and I'm president of the Orphan Drug Colleges at the government level. Of course, I will give an introduction, about half an hour maximum, and then we have one discussion with each other and with you. So this is a kind of artwork that is on my desk in my living room, and I work in my living room since I am an emeritus. And it is actually telling a little bit what we need to do, having a perspective. And this perspective on a disease should be positive. You know, some message before I start everything, I think we always, certainly people in medicine, they always talk about the things that are not met, that are not done, that should be done, that we don't do, that we miss, that fail, and so on. And I think, and I would like to ask to comment later on patients on that, I think we should provide patients, even if we have not the big solution, we have to provide them with a positive attitude and positive, let's say, perspective into the future. This is one of the messages I would like to bring And this is important also when we talk later on about trialing and reimbursement and so on. So I think the need of a positive perspective is important, and the next thing that is important is collaboration, integrated efforts and collaboration to achieve something, and then we come back to that. But of course it starts with basic science, genetics, basic science, immunology, but don't forget that basic science and animal models are not very human. So it means we have to check this all in proper clinical research further on. And there also should be collaboration, and we should not wait involving a clinical specialist in the field when there is not yet a solution. I think basic science and clinical science has to go together, and we should involve each other from the beginning, important messages. And of course, we will touch that today also, because you would expect this, I think. We do this currently in a challenging environment with expensive drugs and a difficult social environment. And this difficult social environment, I look to my American colleagues. What happens in the US currently has impact also in the European situation of future reimbursement. And the evident thing is that many headquarters of companies are based or in Switzerland or in the US. And this has impact on our, let's say, regulations and on our reimbursement. But, you know, as this artwork says, take a positive perspective. Even if you are disabled, it looks like a kind of skeleton, but even if you are disabled, take a positive perspective. I will, during 10, 15 minutes, give you my journey, not my patient journey. I'm not a patient. You see that I have also some problems, but it's not CMT. It's a very rare neurological disease that is eradicated. The rarest neurological disease is polio. You don't find it in Europe anymore. But my disease, where I work on since '84, is rheumatoid arthritis. And I had about the same challenge that you had. I was confronted in the 80s with a disease that is called rheumatoid arthritis. Well, called rheumatoid arthritis, that means the official name of the disease is rheumatoid arthritis. But everyone talks about rheumatism. A very vague term. And that's why I come to the first important thing. We should have the perception of a disease correct. And that's also for you. Not something like a gait disturbance or something. We should really focus on the disease in a correct way. Because if you don't do, you know, they always say, well, it's just some gait problems, no? And it is not important. And actually, when I started this research career in rheumatoid arthritis, actually, rheumatoid arthritis was a disease you had to learn to live with it. After a typical outpatient consultation was, well, you know, you do better. You do better. Continue to do like that. That was what we did in the 80s. And actually, this is very negative. Of course, patients accept a lot. Huh? Patients accept a lot, and you know, they continue to do that, but it's not the right thing to do. And I will guide you through 40-year experience as a clinician and a clinical scientist in trialing and so on. And also, of course, in my experience during the last 15 years in the regulatory aspects and reimbursements, and this mainly in rare diseases, which has some particularities, of course. In rheumatoid arthritis, in the early years when I started, you know, basic science was already ongoing in the 80s and the 90s, but had no effect on our patient approach. It was just in the lab, like you do some genetics, and you know, we did some genetics, and we, of course, rheumatoid arthritis has a long history on proteins, markers like rheumatoid factor and so on, that were already discovered in 1920. But actually, they didn't influence our therapy, see? And then, as I said, we had no therapy except steroids, glucocorticoids, methotrexate, a drug with a very nasty effect on vomiting and nausea. But we managed to treat patients, at least, of course, patients deteriorated even with this treatment, and or got amazingly a lot of side effects when the steroid dose was too high. So this was our first. And then the important steps, and this is important. Even in a period that we had no proper treatment, we made some important steps, I think. We standardized the daily routine of clinical follow-up of our patients. That means I started in the late 80s, together with a nurse, seeing all early RA patients that had 4 to 6 weeks or 2 months disease duration in a standardized way. And a standardized way means that I examined them, I talked with them, I counseled them, I provided some advice to physiotherapy, we did some drug treatment, but we followed them, and also we used standardized measures to follow them. Come back to that. Because the outcome measures, and certainly also patient-reported outcome measures, are key. We discussed the gait analysis. We do that also in rheumatology. But you know, we used a patient-reported outcome is called the HAQ, Health Assessment Questionnaire. Actually, it was developed in California, I think in the 70s. 20 simple questions that a patient has to complete, to fill in. And the strange thing is, it's one of the best outcome measures that exist. It even predicts the outcome 10 years later. It even predicts the costs you have 10 years later. See? Sometimes take it simple. But that's important. And use patient-reported outcome also in daily practice, not only in trials. That is what we did in the early 90s, and it can be a kind of message for you. Also, we changed the perception on the disease. It was a disease, you had to learn to live with it. And don't worry, you will not die from this disease. You will die with this disease, but not from this disease, okay? Actually, at that time, it was not true. This disease, with a lot of inflammation, had a high cardiovascular mortality. And people in California, the first evaluations was that the mortality was similar with a 3-vessel disease in cardio and with a stage 3 in lymphoma. So the severe rheumatoid patients had an increased mortality that was comparable with this disease. That are, of course, judged more important than rheumatism. Everyone, cardiovascular, that is the most important disease. Cardiologists are the most important people. And of course, oncology and lymphoma, we are all scared about that. But actually, we were able to change this perception and to make make it a different disease, to show the reality of the disease. And this was increased mortality, depending on the disease control. If you had a bad disease control, the mortality was increased 3-fold to the normal population. If you had a control disease, it was near 2. And to reassure you already, with the current therapy, the last long-term study in Holland showed that the mortality nowadays is similar to the normal population. Okay. And then we did something, what I think was the best thing we ever did. We started to treat the patients in the early 90s. And you see the reference over there, the COBRA trial, was published in the Lancet in 97. So we were starting to treat patients, or let's say soft, with one drug. And if this drug does not work, the next one. And if there's drug, so we did that. Or we used three drugs, and that were no fancy innovative drugs. The 3 drugs, followed them systematically and tapered them, and we continued with the one drug. Yeah? And actually, at 1 year, the results were similar. But the speed of response, the speed of disease control was much higher in this combination. And then it comes 1.5 years later, the destruction of the joints was significantly different in favor of the combination therapy in the beginning. And of course, the standard of care that was continuing. Yeah? So continuing standard of care, treating patients early to remission, to as deep remission we can, at that time was important. And even this cohort is published in 21-year follow-up. And still without many side effects, but with better disease control in these patients that were initially controlled. So, and this changed the paradigm of the disease. See? And this is important to do, because it's also important for payers and for government that they have a real view on this disease. And then, of course, then we were actually lucky, because basic science came with a cytokine that is called TNF-alpha at the end of the 90s. And TNF-alpha is one cytokine, and you know, in an immunological disease, you have many cytokines that are all interacting with cells, that gives messages to cells. And actually, when you talk with the guys that first used it in Kennedy Institute in London, they said, well, we blocked with a monoclonal antibody this TNF-alpha, and we were expecting, we hoped to see 4 or 5 days results. And actually, the disease came under control for 2 months. And this was a second change of the paradigm. We first had a drug that did something, and then we continued to develop drugs, other modes of action. And currently, we have at least 20 modes of action to treat these patients. And interesting, there's no single drug that is better than the other in group analysis. So all behave similar in group analysis. There could be individual differences, but in group analysis, they are similar. And of course, then we had to get TNF-alpha reimbursed. A patient at that time costed €2,000 drug cost and care and hospitalization and outpatient visits, €2,000 a year mean. And now this drug came in Belgium and in the rest of Europe also with a price of about €15,000. At that time, it was an amazing amount of money, which you can even not compare with the current prices they ask. But in '99, when we had to do the negotiations with the Belgian government, they said, you're crazy. Just for rheumatism, €17,000 per patient per year? It's crazy. That is because of the perspective was wrong. And of course, we had to tell them. And it costed me, together with my colleague from the Ghent University, we spent, I think, 15 evenings and nights to deep in the night in negotiating. And finally, we could convince them after 1-2 years to start reimbursing it. And why was this? Because we, as a professional group, we constructed reimbursement criteria based on data. And after 5 years, it appears that we predicted exactly the number of patients to be treated, that it was correct. And then you get trust. And this is the next word that I would like to bring to you. Start building trust with payers and governments. And not, they don't know. And once they trust you, it will stay, the trust. So, and then also all these data we meanwhile gathered are confirmed in other clinical trials, investigator-initiated trials, best in Holland and KRA in my department. So we started investigator-initiated trials that are mainly looking to how do you have to use these drugs? Because the drugs work. But what is the optimal work, optimal efficacy, and also what is the cost effectiveness? A very important thing. And both drugs have cost effect. Both trials, BEST and KRA, have cost effectiveness data on the long term. And investigator-initiated trials, the KRA trial has 5 years follow-up. The BEST trial is currently at 10 years follow-up. See, so it is important. And then, still it was a high price, but I don't think too high, because all patients benefited from it. And then we were able to reduce the price of all these biologicals by biosimilars, which actually is very important, because then we can spare some money and use it for other patients groups. And in all this, patient participation, shared decision-making with patients is key. And I alluded to that yesterday. We work together with patients, and they organize themselves. They are trained in helping us to, let's say, facilitate the diagnosis, change the attitude in GPs, in older healthcare workers, and this makes that we currently detect rheumatoid arthritis much earlier than 25 years ago. And you change the attitude towards the disease. And this is, I think, critical. Some messages that are important. So key messages, and this is repeating, basic science helps, but it's not enough. So you should start with talking with the clinicians and talking in between clinicians and basic scientists and genetics already in the beginning. Even when therapies are not available, start standardizing your standard of care, your follow-up, and I think it should be done in all centers as equal as possible, because you have centers that do it like that and centers do it like that, and try to find a common path. Because the more standardized you follow your patients, the better they go. I told you about this questionnaire, this HAC, and actually using standard measures in a patient group improves the outcome. We use also a tool for disease activity. And in Holland, they did at some moment already 20 years ago a trial with randomizing a center that did use it and a center that did not use it. Yeah? And actually, in the center where they did use the proper standardized outcome measures, the patient went better than in the other. Because you switch therapies, you measure patients, yeah, and you do something. And this is the difference. And now currently, all these standardized measures are obligatory in our follow-up. Even in Belgium, we get it reimbursed. So the government, because we were a poor specialty, and we had no MRIs and no electromyography, no brain scans. Actually, we were paid to listen to the patients and to do a formal, qualitative, functional evaluation. Interesting, isn't it? So you can achieve something with government also. And then, of course, there's also, you are currently looking to the relevant outcome measures and use them also in daily practice and make also outcome measures that are feasible in daily practice. Correct phase 2-3 trial designing is in rheumatology currently a problem. I made recently an editorial on that. And the reason is we have so many beautiful drugs that it does not make any more a difference in your drug. So that's not your problem. Approval of therapies is a difficult process, but is also a co-responsibility of the professionals. You should talk with these people, with the payers and the governments. You should talk with them, and they will listen. And then one thing that is almost forgotten, once a therapy is available and a company offers a drug to the market and asks a price, it does not stop. It's your responsibility to go with this drug in the correct way. And you know, companies, for instance, they never taper drug. We did. Independent research looked at after 2 years of expensive drugs, when you taper to half the dose, the same effect than continuing the high dose. So that means also that the price is half. Yeah? And again, the last message is provide a positive perspective throughout this journey. And there are specific challenges of rare diseases, your disease, more rare than rheumatoid arthritis. False disease perceptions, you know, we have to tackle this. Low patients number may discourage the industry, but actually sometimes industry has no good view on it. In my specialty, when I was doing trials with rheumatoid arthritis, they always say, and we had already 3-4 drugs approved, and I came, well, yeah, there's a high unmet need in rheumatoid arthritis. I said, high unmet need? I have no high unmet need anymore in rheumatoid arthritis. I have still a high unmet need in psoriatic arthritis. And then they told me, but this is a rare disease. Yes, of course, but if you don't look to a disease, it will stay rare. Yeah? And actually nowadays, it turns out that psoriatic arthritis is as frequent, the same prevalence as rheumatoid arthritis. And now, after 10 years too late, they started to develop drugs to it. So sometimes they are stupid. So I don't hope there are too many people of the industry in the room, but sometimes they miss the correct perspective. Why? Because they only talk to key opinion leaders that tell them the same that they want to hear. Okay, clear message. Trial development will be a great challenge. We'll come back to that later. But also, after all these beautiful drugs and gene therapy and advanced therapeutic medical products, currently we are confronted with, even after a correct trial program, with many uncertainties. Uncertainties about how long to treat, which dose to treat, and so on. Uncertainties of gene therapy, will it bring? Will it bring what the company tells us and ask a very high price? Yeah, and I'm confronted with in the last 10 years with many things, and I'm not going into detail, but I can tell you terrible stories. And of course, advanced medical products like gene therapy and other one-shot therapies, cell therapies, and so on are really promising. Promising, innovative. These are, of course, names that this is again a little bit worse than a framing. Huh? It is, in the meantime, it tells us this is the best drug. Promising and innovative is also always good. But don't forget, we have some uncertainties that stays even after trials, and we have to follow it. And of course, pricing is an important issue. And I give you a few examples, and then I stop, and then we discuss. The options are, let's say, change false perception, collaboration, increasing collaboration with everyone, adaptive trial design, I'll come back to that. And I give you also some examples, temporary, conditional reimbursement, continuous monitoring of effects once the drug is used in patients in collaboration with all partners, and this is critical. And in the meantime, do not forget optimizing the additional care and also pay for this. Yeah? It's a little bit stupid to ask 2 million for one drug, for one shot of therapy, yeah? And indeed change the patient's fate, that is okay. But in the meantime, forget to pay for the rehabilitation, for everything what is associated with to treat it in an optimal way. Smart trial design. I think you might look to the platform type trials. What is a platform trial? It's a platform. And you actually, you randomize, you introduce all patients with the disease. Yeah? You look to optimal standard of care. You treat as homogeneous as possible with what you think that is the recommended treatment at this moment. You have a first drug. You enter it also in the platform. You randomize. Yeah? Then you continue. After a while, you see that this new drug is not different from the standard of care, and you stop it. No? If it is really splendid, yeah, then you continue. Yeah? And eventually you could also enter another drug in this system. And the main advantage is that this is flexible, and also you compare a drug with standard of care. You know, I did a lot of trials where the inclusion criteria were, for instance, recent non-treated new patients. And if you look to the difference in the many countries of standard of care, in some countries they already used 40 milligrams of prednisone, in other countries none. And they are all entered in the same trial because they had no typical anti-rheumatic drug. So, and you have, this trial is much more difficult to interpret than you have a standardized background. One important trial design could be an umbrella trial. Yeah? When you have a disease with many genetic differences, you bring the different genetics you bring in a pathway, and then you use a drug in the 3 eventually also in placebo-controlled. You can randomize in the system, but at least you can compare in between different genetics. The upper is a basket trial. I once was confronted with a request for reimbursement in an oncology indication where you have one oncological mechanism of action that you can tackle with a specific drug. It's really targeted therapy. And this mechanism is present in a glioblastoma in a 15-year-old boy, but also in a colon cancer in an 80-year-old person. It is in 10 different diseases they found it, in 10 different cancers they found it. They did a basket trial, put everything in this basket, and looked what's the outcome. And this brings much more power. You see improvement. The disadvantage is that you cannot compare an 80-year-old person with a third relapse of cancer with a young boy of 12 years old with a glioblastoma that you can, with this therapy, can shrink, and that is accessible for extraction. It means the unmet need in those different conditions is completely different, and you get problems in reimbursement. Okay, but this is possibilities. You should think about that. And we took some Belgian initiatives for improving the organization. So we have a Belgian plan, rare disease. It's obligatory in Europe. We are currently working on an update on that. In the Risivinami, this is a national payer in Belgium, we have specific conventions for the care of rare diseases, and we are currently looking for reimbursement standard of using patient advocates also to reimburse that. The orphan drug colleges, I'm president of the orphan drug colleges, is a kind of peer review system where we discuss all individual dossiers together with experts in the field and allow approval for the people that are really in need. And we have in the KCE, the KCE is Kenniscentrum, is a knowledge center in Belgium. They sponsor investigator-initiated trials that industry does not do. So a nice option to really look to what you can achieve also in neglected situations. So we collaborate in Belgium with in the Beneluxa. Beneluxa is an evaluation platform, a health technology assessment platform that is similar in Belgium, the Netherlands, Luxembourg, Austria, and Ireland. Ireland is not yet in the Beneluxa, but are the most recent country that, and we hope that we can convince, let's say in the future, bigger countries like France and Germany also to participate because we do health technology assessment together. It spares a lot of work, and it is more powerful towards in the discussions with the industry. We do common horizontal scanning also. And then we have, and then I almost stop, we have in Belgium a system that allows us to treat patients earlier than EMA approval. So when there is a drug that will be approved probably within 6 months, 8 months, so the trials are done, and EMA is discussing this, it takes 6 months, 8 months, and then we can already have it accessible in Belgium, but only for patients with a very high unmet need. And we define this unmet need every year, making an unmet need list with input from industry, but also input from patient organizations. And I think you should bring CMT on this list in Belgium. Even a scientific board can do it. Make it visible that this CMT is on a high unmet need list. There is no therapy. And why is this important? When there is a therapy, it could be early reimbursed, but also you give the message that they should do research towards it. And patient representatives have a voice in this, and we give a temporary provisional sum of money, so we do not reimburse, we give a compensation in money that can be adapted later on. And we have also recently, and it will start now in January, a fast access, immediate after EMA approval, when EMA gives the drug a prime label or an accelerated assessment label, The company can bring it in Belgium to the market. There will be no price negotiation. They get a fixed sum that is depending on the type of drug. So it means a small molecule will have a certain price, a biological a higher price, and an advanced therapeutic and medical product much higher price. And then we start treating the patients, and we evaluate. And after 2-3 years, we will see what it brings. And this compensates a little bit for all these uncertainties. And once it is, let's say, clearly working and there are no problems, it will get a proper reimbursement and price discussion. When it does not bring, it will be removed. And so you avoid paying unnecessary money. But of course, we need an IT system that is performant, and we currently working on that, and we hope that it works in January, February. This is a little bit what we use, because in this unmet need list, we need criteria. What criteria? And we made a system. This is published in Health Policy in 2018, where this is based actually on an evaluation of the needs that are judged by the general population. So not by a patient organization, not by a specialist, not by doctors, but a random sample of the Belgian population discussed during 3 weekends what were the most important things that you should, where you should have impact on in Belgian healthcare. And mortality is one, but quality of life is ranked much higher. So we were weighing it, and also social vulnerability and societal impact is over there. And based on this criteria, we make every year an unmet need list, and this unmet need list can be used for stimulating research, but also for early access. And this is some additional thoughts. Pricing will always be a challenge, and you don't get fooled. Adopting biosimilar use is a duty of ours. There is a big option of off-label use and in some drugs. Some old drugs are sometimes not used anymore while they could have impact. And then I think care, standardizing care, using guidelines, responsible prescribing, cost consciousness is critical in everything we do. And this is everything what I wanted to say to you. And you may appreciate that I love art. And I would like to stop with this quote: may you live in interesting times. And that means, again, the positive perspective, because times will be interesting in the future. There will be more possibilities, but use them in a proper way. And I was taking this quote from the Venezia Biennale of Arte in 2019 when I went on pension. And this was also and nowadays also difficult times, wars and everything is a problem. And also in Venice they say, well, you know, we have now African art, we have South American art, we have Eskimo art, and art from and these are all positive things reflecting what happens in the world, and take it as a possibility. That's what I wanted to tell you, and we will have a discussion later on, not now, because I would like to give the microphone also to Alexandre now. Oh, you have already another microphone, a green one, yeah. And I think, you know, I said collaborating with patients is key. And I work together with patients for 20-25 years, but not in CMT. So Alexandre will continue a little bit with some slides, and then we have a broader discussion, okay? And questions afterwards.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Alexandre Hoyau, the previous one before. Yeah, Alexandre Hoyau. I'm president of CMT France and board member of the European CMT Federation and now the ECRA. I am a patient first. I am a CMT 1E patient. Thank you for your job, Mike. And my 2 kids are also affected. I am the first case in my family, so I had no real idea what might happen to me in the future. Now it's more clear, brutally clear. I'm losing my arms, I'm losing my legs, I'm losing my hearing. That's CMT also. And I don't want this for my kids. Who would like this for his kids? No one. So I want a cure, and so I'm happy to be in this one table discussing about access to therapies. So we are at a paradigm shift, a real turning point. I'm convinced about that. Victories are coming, and we need these victories. We have encouraging phase 2 and 3 running, and many other promising drugs therapies underway. But this evolution also changed our role as a patient advocacy groups. We are no longer just here to raise awareness or support the families in their daily life. We are here as active partners with you, researchers, clinicians, industry, to help throughout the entire life of drug development. So we need to create a new model of collaboration, and I think that's what we are doing here with the ECRA. A new model of collaboration where patients are co-drivers of innovation and just not recipients. So here is the table. I think it's not really easy to read for you. I won't go in the details, but it is just some ideas, humbly, some ideas about our role as a national organization and European organization. There is a huge work to do. To give some example, for the research development at the 5 key stages, the first one is research and development. At the national scale, we need to encourage creation of national registries. I'm convinced that we should work with the government for this, to have permanent registries, not dependent to funding and or industry, and also working with the UN scale, also because it's permanent. I hope so. The UN will be permanent. And for clinical trial, we can help to co-design protocols. Of course, we cannot. We need to help to design protocols with with you and the industry to make patient-relevant endpoints. So at the European scale, we can advocate for innovative clinical trials with the EMA, as you said, and advocate for the rare disease. That's what we did. We do with the awareness campaign. For the marketing authorization, market authorization access, we are not yet here. I hope we will be there in few months or year, and it will be new challenges. So we need to be ready for this. That's the message. And you can see here, it's so food for thought for the discussion maybe after. I will go forward. So the core challenge is, you know, access to therapy in Europe is a postcode lottery. Despite a single access market with the AMA authorization, there is big differences between each countries. After the AMA approval, sometimes it takes 100 days to have the drug, but in other countries it could take many years, a decade. And for example, for LON, Leber hereditary optic neuropathy, there is a drug in Germany since 2015, and it took 10 years to be accessible for the patient in England. That's just an example. And the price war, as you said, will be a big, big challenge too. We are We are talking about economy in each country, I think so, in Europe now. So it will be a big challenge. And for ultra-rare disease, there is a bigger challenge, the number of the patients. So we need to work at the European scale. That's not an option, it's really necessary. But there is lever for acceleration to access to treatment. We need to build healthier Europe on best practices. And there is good practices in Europe. Just a few examples. We can see here, this is the next slide, sorry. So we need to reinforce European levels. In the EUN, I think we discussed about this, we need to have stronger EUNs and to duplicate what we are doing in each countries to connect these hospitals to the EUNs. There is also the new HTA regulation, a promise for faster access through joint clinical assessments. We see duplication and creating a strong scientific baseline for all the 27 member states. And there is also EMA's accelerated pathway, tools like PRIME, as you said, and conditional approvals. This is crucial tools for accelerating the access to treatment. And we need to be inspired by what's happening in each country. We need better maybe benchmark, maybe could be one of our work with the EQA and ECMTF to make a benchmark of about good practices in each countries and to duplicate this at the European scale. For example, in France, there is the ARCS Early Access Program, Accès Précoce, which allows reimbursement and access to promising drugs before price negotiations are finalized. It's close to what you presented just before. And we should scale up this model in other countries which don't have it. And the compassionate use is called expanded access, I think, in US. It's authorizing the use of unauthorized innovative medicine for patients with a rare disease or serious condition with no alternative treatment. So facing a therapeutic impasse when it's expected a benefit justify the risk taken. In Germany, there is an immediate access at launch when a new drug is available. A new drug is available immediately just after EMA approval. And the price negotiation happen in parallel during the first year, and there is balance after when it goes to the market. So it's going faster. In Italy, there is a dedicated innovative fund, which is very interesting to me. When I discussed about that in France, some people said it's not possible, it's impossible. But Italy did, so it's possible. Congrats for this. It's a tax on promotion from pharma companies, 5%, and this fund can help for innovative therapy. So my conclusion is our vision is call to action. European Health Union is built, not decreed, so we need to build it together. It must be an ecosystem driven by patient needs and guided by equity and solidarity. So our ask is nationally include patient organization group as a partner, work with us at the decision-making table, at all the stages of a drug development, and at the EU level, aggregate our strengths, help each country to have a stronger association. That's crucial. If we want to get to have a stronger European Federation, we need strong national organization. So we need to help each organization to get stronger. And to policymakers, to industry, regulators, there is no, some are here today. Work with us. You said that, I'm happy to hear that. Work with us at every step of the way. And you know, there is brilliant idea here, but brilliant ideas come true when it's changes in our patient daily life. Let's together close this gap. Thank you.
Thank you. I think this is a very important message from the patients, and personally, you know, you're completely right. We should not accept lotteries. Huh? And that makes me think about my first weeks when I was working for the government, and there was a disease called SMA, and it was offered as a lottery. So we could bring patients to a lottery, we could register them for a lottery, and that means that the company was going to sell the drug in the US, and what the surplus of available drug that went to Europe and was put in a lottery, and every month some patients were picked up out of this lottery. And I can assure you, I was present at that meeting. We were with 5-6 people listening to that. And I never have kicked out people that quickly out of the room. Huh? It is afraid to hear that. I was not, and I was, you know, the top of the Residami was present. I was there. Representative of the Minister of Health was there, and we said, we were looking to each other and said, this is the first time that we hear this. And they were kicked out, I can tell you. And we got it reimbursed in Belgium. It's now, but this is terrible, and we should not accept that. Okay, now we have time for the real roundtable. Yeah? And I would like to discuss you some issues, and not limited to this, but it could guide us. And I would like first to ask, for instance, Maike, disease perceptions. Do you manage already to have the correct perception on this disease into the public with neurologists, perhaps even, with GPs? And do you know how much a CMT costs to the society currently? Do you have any idea? And how can you change this, or can you improve this?
Wow, this is already like a bunch of really important questions, I think. One point, a comment on the previous two presentations that really fits into what you just asked is the perception of the term patient. Just crossed my mind. I think the word patient, and that doesn't only apply for English, it's similar term in many languages, already is judgment. It already means that patients are condemned to endure a lot of stuff and to be patient about it and to just basically shut up and and take it, whatever comes. And so patients should no longer be patient, right? I think it's important to kind of in our minds definitely correct that term of that perception of just enduring and being patient. Also in our minds as clinicians, because I'm one of the lucky ones. I am not a patient. I am a clinician, scientist, and a neurologist. So I do this for a living. This is my job, and this is also my passion. But after finishing with my job, I can go home and have my private life, and I no longer have to think about CMT all the time. But other people do have to. So we have to find all together. We have to find this balance of, on the one hand, involving everyone and mobilizing everyone and doing this call of like, don't no longer be patient, please. And on the other hand, also to taking the responsibility to, or like sharing it on several parts of shoulders and not pushing too much responsibility to the patients themselves because they have enough to carry already. And that now comes to your question, basically. So we definitely need to improve training. Yep. I think I'm quite lucky that I work at a hospital where neuromuscular diseases are already implemented in the curriculum and that they are really a focus of the research already. So this is also how I myself got into this, just by chance, because I met people who inspired me that this is interesting. So all of us need to be an inspiration and a role model and to involve younger scientists. And I think this is also one of the purposes of this conference.
One of the important things that currently in the national plan in Belgium, we define expertise. We define the centers with a specific expertise. But in the definition of those centers, we ask them to play a role in educating GPs. So it is not only necessary to define expert centers, that we need them, and we have them, mostly have them, but they should not only take a role in research, they should also take a role in educating GPs for instance, red flags and things like that. So this becomes now mandatory in the national plan, and I think we should not forget that. Davide.
First of all, there have been a lot of important messages from your presentation, both of them. And one important one is that every disease has a sort of common pathway from knowledge to finding a cure. And so we can learn a lot from your experience and declining the proper view for CMT, but the problem is that we are far behind rheumatoid arthritis, unlikely. We don't have any drug treatment available, but a lot of consideration can be done anyway. First, we need to be prepared to manage the treatment when it will come. So we must start now. An important point is that there is a clear underperception of CNT among the public. It's not well known. GPs doesn't know the disease, maybe see one patient in their life. So information is one of our commitment. We are trying to do this, but it's not easy in the general population. We are trying to forming specialists, as we are doing, but it's still not enough. Another point, we need to convince authorities of the importance and the disease burden of CMT in the population, chronic disease lasting for all life with a high disease burden. And we spoke yesterday about important point that we can do together, the economy, the cost of the disease. This is something that we can do together. Because, I mean, there are economic costs, there are social costs, there are work costs, and there are programs to do to measure this. In France, in Italy, we are starting. In Germany, there is also some indication of this. So information and data. Important point you raised, you need to provide data, believable data, to raise trust in the authorities. This is the first line. So the aim is to find a cure and then to have the proper access to the cure.
Yes, but that's a long way to go.
Yeah, absolutely.
And in the meanwhile, you cannot wait.
No.
And in the meanwhile, you cannot say, well, we wait for the cure. Rheumatoid arthritis, we have no cure either. Yeah. So actually, this is a nice principle, and we should strive. We should aim for cure, I think. But do not wait to treat patients until the ultimate drug or the ultimate therapy will be available. Probably it might come, it might not come. And when I see that you have, let's say, a disease with multiple variants, genetic variants, probably it will not come from one treatment. So that means that you have to stay open and build up experience and build up proper care, and then of course try to find the best drug or therapy and then look what it brings. But the ultimate cure, I don't know. What do you think, Mike?
I think this is a crucial point here. Other than rheumatoid arthritis, CMT is a hereditary disease, and it comes from a very, very broad genetic background. So we have more than 100 genes described. We have several cell types involved. We have multiple pathomechanisms. So there will not be the one cure that applies for all. And so we have two different approaches. The one is to really dive deep into the pathomechanism and to rather like aim for individualized therapy, which is super, super difficult, even arranging to like those N of 1 studies, because some individual genotypes are like just very, very rare. And then we have also broader concepts that also target pathomechanisms, but from another end, from an overarching end. And so we can try to leverage disease based on that for more patients. So we have a lot of statistical issues that we have to target, which is complicated, and also complicated to convince authorities of. That we cannot like use all CMT patients together, but that we have to look at them individually. And I think one of the really, really important points was what you just said at the very beginning, that in order to do that, we all need to work together, clinicians and basic scientists, right from the beginning, because otherwise we can like just diffuse into several directions. Yeah, dissociate basically. So we need a stabilizer that keeps us together, and yeah.
Yes, I think this is a very critical and a specific thing for your disease. The thing is that, you know, at some moment we are confronted with rheumatoid arthritis. We were confronted with, let's say, Western Europe and US situations, and actually we have about the same genes. I did some research in Central Africa, in Congo, the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And I you know, it was thought that rheumatoid arthritis was not present in Central Africa, and actually it was not, because you have to look the proper way. And interesting, yes, they did not went to the hospital. They did go to the hospital. And of course, once we did a proper study and we managed to find out that the prevalence of the disease was as frequent in Central Africa than in Western Europe, we found out that it was less severe. And less severe, it was a complete different gene environment and a different inflammatory, infectious environment. And those two together made it a complete different disease. It means it looked the same, but less progressive, less severe. Amazing. So I was thinking to scientists, go to Central Africa and look what plays over there. It could be a specific lab situation. Yeah? And you could find out, you could learn from those situations for your own people. And I think, okay. Yeah?
Heterogeneity is a great problem for us, because you mentioned this. And concerning Africa, for instance, in CNT1A is almost absent in Africa, which is really incredible, genetic background different, and for some reason. And also we have founder mutation in different countries, but overall the problem is the same. And so on one side, we will have a specialized therapy for each type, for some types, but we also have some common pathways that we can address, like for instance, HDAC6 inhibitors and so on. So this is a hope for this. Another point you raised, important, standard of care and care of patient improve the outcome of the patient. Just when you take care of the patient, you improve the outcome. I remember the US trial with ascorbic acid, the placebo arm did better than the historical arm. So that's an important point as well. Yeah. Concerning this, I think that you raised another very important point and suggestion, a platform for trials. This is something we should work on. Collect together with the industry the information we are gaining for the trials, for the natural history studies. We are doing something with this. Put them all together and collect so you can compare the...
I think this would be a good start.
Yeah.
In your disease, what I understand from your disease, it could be a good start to start a kind of platform of patients together with the patients, because the patients should be in the steering committee, I think. And then make this platform working, try to homogenize your standard of care arm. This would also prepare for future trials. And then whenever you do something, and it could be, let's say, talking to the patients, counseling the patients, monitoring the patients, showing them your beautiful pictures. This could already be a start. Do standardizing the way you do it, and then you can, let's say, enter novel therapies in the future in that. And in the same time, you are prepared for it. Readiness is important. I will not further discuss these trials, but this is, I think, an important thing. But yes, okay.
Thank you very much for this. I think that can be brilliant if possible. For instance, with prostate disease, it is incredible what they've done with platforms, but it did need buy-in from the companies. One of the major issues at the moment with CMT is, and this is actually happening, it's not that it might happen, is that, companies often want to license in the US first because it makes more money. That's just simply a fact of life. Yeah. So what is happening and is likely to happen is trials often start there, or they try to go for accelerated approval there. Yeah. So you might have had a trial that happened internationally, where patients then have access to it like you described in the US, and then it's not access in Europe. So even though I think it's a great idea, I think it needs buy-in from companies. And until you have, prostate cancer, it worked once they had enough drugs so that the placebo arm was no longer there. Then I think it becomes really powerful. But I think there is an issue with companies, and I'm not saying I blame companies. Companies are businesses, but it is an issue throughout the world at the moment that the companies for the genetic therapies, throughout all of the ones for neuromuscular disease, have tried to get licensed in the US first, and that can be an issue for the platform.
You raise an important question. The question of industry, and I first tell you my experience. And of course, I did a lot of trials. I did at least 3-4 trials where I started from phase 1 to the launch, and I was PI of the phase 2 and 3. And actually, of course, we are confronted with a split between Europe and the US and the headquarters and so on. But I think also companies depend on your expertise. So if they come to the European market, they should also talk to the experts here in an adult way, and not, let's say, well, I would say it, they are not going to do the trials here, you do the trials, yes? And there's a system in industry that tries to go quicker and speedy and more speedy, and then we are not far away from that we go that fast that a company is going to do the trial, and you bring the patients and they are not interested further because they do everything. And you should, they are also not you cannot allow that. You have to stay on your expertise and your viewpoint and they cannot do that. That's my person. I always did this. And at the end, if you talk to these companies also in the US like that, they appreciated it. And of course, you should go quick, and you should not delay with your unnecessary administration. That's fine. But you should bring quality, and actually, they need quality of studies. I showed you the review of negative trials, the reference. You should read that. What was the case? In rheumatoid arthritis, in current phase 3 trials, the latest phase 3 trials of the big companies, and I wrote this editorial of a moment that one big program of one of the biggest companies of the world completely failed. And it failed because they didn't listen to the real experts. They were looking to phase 2, and yes, phase 2 was not that positive, but of course, secondary analysis still showed that some advantages could be there. And the complete program failed. There was wrong trial design. And by the way, if I analyzed the trial designs of those drugs trials, and the biggest problem, and then I come to US, Europe, and the rest of the world, the trial design, the trials, the placebo responses in those trials were approximately 24% placebo response in the US, 28% in Europe, yes? West and Eastern Europe, 35 to 40%, and in some parts of Asia and Central South America, South America, 68% placebo response. We are talking about the same disease, no? Can you understand that? This one is also dependent of, because this company is mainly focusing on rapid recruitment in different parts of the world where it's cheap. Yeah? And then this complete trial program of this big company failed, and you may look to that editorial. It failed at this billions of dollars that were spent for nothing. So, and actually we as clinicians and as scientists, we should communicate as that to these companies also. They can also learn from us, no? Davide.
Yeah, I think the relationship with the companies is very important, and it's open. They listen to us as we propose the trial design. But at the end, they are driven eventually by money, by investors, by FDA and EMA. And the choices that have been done following this were not the best. And the big companies have their view. Small companies are more liable to listen to you, but also to amenable to the influence of those. So this is a real problem we need to address, because eventually it's a damage to the company itself, as we've seen, for instance, with Farnext. Yeah.
Couldn't agree more. I think it's so important to be aware of each and everyone's interests in it, and not to go into this discussion too emotionally, but really be aware who needs what. And of course, smaller companies, as you said, are really dependent on financing all the money that they put into the development process. So I think what is crucial now, and you basically named it, for approval and also for market entrance, are two main things. The one is outcome parameters. So if the definition of outcome parameters is just not valid, it can be a cool parameter, very fancy, but we have seen this in the past, like for diabetic neuropathy, that median nerve conduction velocity was the primary outcome parameter for a trial, and this just measures carpal tunnel syndrome, but it doesn't measure diabetic neuropathy. So it wasn't representative and a trial failed. So outcome parameters need to be defined so that they represent the disease, and this is specifically difficult for CMT since it is most of the time a slowly progressive disease. So the observation time needs to be long enough, otherwise there cannot be, like it's impossible, there cannot be a statistically significant effect. So we all together need to communicate this to industry partners, that it doesn't make sense to plan a trial for half a year or a year, that at least 2 years or more are required in order to have a chance of seeing any effects, also specifically based on the sample sizes that are limited to the rareness of the diseases. And the other point is market access, and you said, I think that was really well pointed out on your slide, that this varies a lot through countries, right? Even within Europe. And in Germany, we are lucky that we have this situation that after EMA approval, the drug comes to the market immediately. And then within 6 months, the company needs to submit a dossier with all the information on the clinical trial and the drug. And then there is a very standardized process on how the quality is evaluated of this drug. And experts can give their opinion, and then there will be a discussion. And finally, after like more or less a year after approval, there will be this final decision of the Federal Joint Committee, which is the biggest association basically to evaluate this, and they give a suggestion whether there is benefit or not, and based on that the company has to negotiate the final price, which is a good process. But this process requires, now there's a new rule now, patient representation. So this situation that the study has been conducted in Asia or Africa purely under like cheaper conditions perhaps, doesn't work anymore for Germany. Germany says 5% of the trial population have to be examined in Germany. Otherwise, the company has to pay a price which is up to 10% of the final price, which is a lot of money. And this is a new rule just by 2025. And it makes sense because otherwise we run into those problems. Yeah.
Interesting, because I have to finalize the new reimbursement criteria. It's a good idea. It's a good idea to introduce it. I have still till December to convince the other guys, but it would be well. It is actually true, and I think one of the problems, of course, that we also face in Belgium, probably also in other countries, that is, of course, companies are very powerful, and in Belgium there are many pharmaceutical companies, And so that means that a lot of people do their job in such a company. So blaming companies is a sensitive thing because they say, well, we provide so many people a full-time job. Don't make it too difficult. Huh? But of course, it's a balance you have to take. Yes, Ingolf?
Thank you very much. I'm really impressed of all the ideas and learnings we can take home now from this panel already, even that panel only. Let me ask a more general question to all of you now. We are talking of CMT and the cost of CMT, etc., as a very important factor also for research, etc. Now, what is CMT? You know that we have CMT 1A, B, C, D, E. We have 2A, B, C. It's about perhaps 100 subtypes of CMT. They are all different. Now, I look for a drug for CMT. What does it mean? For 1A, perhaps it is useful because it's all the same. But even there, the phenomena, what really the patient's progress in CMT and in walking, etc. It's so different, even if you have the same type. And if you have one family, I can tell you, it is completely different, the progress. So what are we talking about when
correct.
we then come to admission of approval of drugs for which CMT, etc.? Can you give me an answer to this? Thanks.
You know, this is in every disease as such. I presented you rheumatoid arthritis. Rheumatoid arthritis, currently we have 57% of the patients that we can control within 3 months and stay under control the next 10 years. There are other people that are completely refractory in the beginning and have a lot of difficulties. We need to switch to 3, 4, 5. We have to try to, with 4 or 5 therapies, before we have a decent control and not yet perfect. So this is as it is in most diseases. The problem is don't bring this too much to the government because they don't get that. Yeah, it is you have to imagine that a government gets rheumatoid arthritis, CMT, multiple sclerosis. They get phone calls of at least 10, 20 lobby groups or scientific companies a week, and all requesting the same. And so don't make it too difficult, but focus on the essentials. And the essentials it is also to politicians. It is about cost. And so I mean it, stay cost consciousness. Cost consciousness is key, but also, and they are very sensitive to it, you do it for the patients, and also communicate with the government because that are they depend. The government depends on people that vote for them. Yeah, and you can comment on that.
Yeah, you mentioned that there is economical and social and medical study we are conducting in France, and we hope that Cure CMT will be approved. Because we will have the grant and the money to pay the study, but for now we work on this, and I discussed a lot with the EFM Téléthon in France. We conducted some studies like this, and as you said, it's not only about money, it's not only about cost. It's about your life and the impact of CMT in your professional life, in your study, when it's early stage, the impact on the life of a patient. So we don't need to be only focused on the money side. Of course, it's important, but for now there is no drug. If we just have a drug with an improvement of the quality of life for the patients, it's a big step forward for us.
Well, it means just cost consciousness means don't spoil money. Don't throw it away. Use it as it should be. And I come back to and then I stop again, but had a difficult time to ask government for 15,000 euro a patient a year for the appropriate drug for those who were in need. And we tried to limit it to those who were really in need. And if you look back now, 25 years later, this 15,000 euro a patient a year is actually nothing for what you get. Most patients stayed at work, yeah? Most patients had quality of life. When I'm currently now looking to X-rays of the last trial we did, and actually in 5 years, there is nearly no damage to report anymore. While a nice joke, and it's not a joke actually, when I was collaborating with orthopedic surgeons, my best friends, as you know, actually we were doing a trial for foot surgery, the type of trial we needed for foot surgery in RA, and we had to stop the trial after 1 year because there were no patients available for foot surgery anymore. Yeah. See? So that means that we made a lot of progress. The big problem is that we don't measure that and we don't report it in a proper way. And we should report that, let's say, avoiding in 100 or 200 patients foot surgery, hip surgery, knee surgery, with the associated complications, infection complications, and so on, hospitalizations. If you report this, then it becomes serious. Huh? Okay. There was a question over there.
Yes, I have a question because there is a specific point that could be very, very relevant for the standard of clinical care that has not been taken and discussed here. That is proper diagnosis. What I mean is not exactly the diagnosis, I'm talking about the codification. That is very relevant to share how many patients we have in a hospital, in the general, region, on the national level, to know how many people has a specific disease. In the case of CMT, we have more than 100 genes, different phenotypes, and so on. So we have to code.
But there is the OFA code for this.
Yes, this is my point. My point is that because one of my hats is I'm the scientific coordinator of Orphanet in Spain. And that what we are promoting in France a lot, I think it's also in Germany, we're trying to promote to use the ORFA code. It's not perfect, but it's the best way to codify. So we have to be very...
Well, actually, you know, my department in rheumatology, when I started in rheumatology, we had 28 beds, 36 beds full, completely full with people with destructive disease. 10 years later, it was 28 beds. Currently, they have only 10 beds anymore. And actually, we are the only department in Belgium that has specific beds for rheumatoid. So that means that things change, no? And you know, a bed hospitalization costs enormous, but we have to report this more. And of course, those who are deciding should read these reports, something different. Okay, how long do we still have? We still have 5 minutes. Are there people in the audience that would like to comment still to some of the issues we raised, or some of the solutions, or the possible, for instance, the to-dos now?
Yeah, I would love to.
Yeah.
I don't have a solution, but I'd like you a comment. Thanks for this great discussion. I mean, this is definitely important, and a lot of ideas are coming to my mind. Just a quick comment. Would an approval of any kind of drug for any kind of CMT pave the way to new drugs, in your opinion?
I do believe that it is important, because then there is one positive example, and that will help a lot to increase awareness in the general population, but also for physicians. And it will definitely motivate other patients to, I'm sure, to contribute to trials and to also be registered somewhere, to have their natural history documented. So it's one example that gives hope. And definitely it will also draw the attention of industry partners, because eventually they have to pay for the trials, right? We cannot pay for them ourselves.
I think this is correct. Huh? I think this is correct. I think you should do something, and there should be one agent. The problem is which agent, and does it have to come from an innovative drug? Yeah. I give you an example in a disease where I also know, scleroderma, where there is no treatment, but there is evidence that some old drugs targeting the immune system might work also in that disease, slowing down the disease. And this drug is an anti-B cell therapy, and preliminary evidence makes it clear that it might work. The problem is the company that owns this drug does not want to do the trials. Why? Because an old drug that we are going to repurpose now, that is an old drug, does not bring the money. See, this is something like we also have to think, and perhaps this also could be a start. Not only this wonderful, beautiful miracle drug, yeah? And so we have also to think about that.
Just to answer the question, I discussed about this with another president of other disease, and they have many drugs now. And I said, how did you get, what's the recipe for that? And she said, you need one victory. And after that, it opened the way for the other drugs. And the story is very funny because the first drug they add to the market, after a few years, they discovered that it wasn't effective. Yeah. But it opened the way to all the other drugs effective. Yeah. So I'm convinced we need just one victory.
Yeah, this could be.
And here again, I think it's important to redefine what we are looking for, because cure is the very last step, right, of a very, very long journey. But as you said, every single step towards it is helpful. And if there is a drug that helps, that leverages, that just reduces the severity of the disease, that's already important, even though it's no cure.
I think this is very true, because cure, and the word of cure is mainly launched by companies because of the stock market. See? And this should not withhold us to do proper work. And I will try to end up, because of everything is perceptions. Huh? When I started and I brought you the trial that, we'll come to here. Yeah, I come, 2 minutes. I just make one comment. This publication I said in Lancet in 1997. When we started this trial, key opinion leaders told us, what are you going to do? You're going to kill the patients. It was the perceptions, just these same key opinion leaders. And we should be very careful with that, and we should, when we are key opinion leaders, we should be critical for ourselves. The same key opinion leaders, after the trial, when the results became available, they said, we do not understand that they did not use a higher dose. With that, I stop my comments, and we have 1 or 2 questions over there, and there's still room for that. Okay, thank you. It doesn't work. The mic doesn't work.
Two mics. I wanted to come back to some of the questions on here, but loop round to some of the discussion as well. So question 5 about collaboration between different disciplines. So I'm an allied health professional, and I think in these sorts of discussions, having an allied health professional on the panel would be very helpful, because some of the perspectives that we bring through can, not just in terms of the standards of care that's current, but actually how we optimize care. Because when you were talking earlier about combination therapies, one of those therapies can be what we can bring, because actually there's potential to optimize the outcomes of certain drug interventions. And we struggle, I think, probably outside of groups like this, because I think this is very collaborative here, and people have heard me say this before. Yeah. But actually, this is something, we can be actually improving some of those trial outcomes if we are considered as an intervention, or whatever it might be. But I think we struggle even more getting industry's ear when it comes to designs where we may actually be able to help.
Yeah, allied health professionals are very important, I think. Personally, half of my PhD students were health professionals and no doctors, because doctors didn't want in the beginning to do a PhD in rheumatoid. It was not worth doing it. They preferred to go to cardio and so on. But health professionals did, and actually it helped our system.
I think we have to close.
I think we have to close, so I think it's very important, and I was very pleased with the audience, I must say, very active audience. And I don't know anything about CMT, but after these 2 days, I know many things more. And what I understood is that there are a lot of similarities. And so don't be desperate, be positive, and continue your work. You do a great job. Thank you.